Coming up on the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
Let me give you a shortcut. If you're drinking red wine and you say cherry, you're right.
The food is a star, and I want to bring in a wine that can stand up to the food, but also makes people think a little bit.
I like the Spanish word for it better. Licorella.
Licorella.
Your dad had you tasting wine at the dinner table. How old were you?
I must have been 11, 12, 13.
Did you have a favorite wine back then?
Maybe a Joseph Phelps. I can't recall if it was an Insignia.
He rolls out the 98 and you're like, do you have the 97?
Come on, Dad.
And now, the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
The cell phones have been silenced. The wine carefully poured. We'll tell you what's in the glasses, don't worry. And just like that, the podcast begins, the Tall Mike Wine Podcast. The wine podcast that's not all about wine, because all about wine can be, no. Trust me, it's better this way. The wine podcast like no other. My name is Mike Stone. I host the show. I produce the show. I edit the show. I think you get the picture. The podcast is coast to coast and around the world in 66 countries on 6 continents and 48 of these United States, from Danville, California to Estero, Florida, from Martinsville, Indiana to Reno, Nevada. The biggest little city in the world, Reno is. It's sort of the jumbo shrimp of geography. Wherever you are, thanks for finding me. I appreciate it. Are you subscribed to the podcast? Well, please do so you don't miss an episode. And here's something you may not know. I've been cranking these out since January of 2021, and each episode is still available, and there are some fun conversations. Feel free to binge me. And if you like it, drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and write a review. They tell me it helps a lot. And now, episode 43. I am back in the Vintner's room at Nicholson Ranch Winery in Sonoma, California. Legit wine country. And my guest is the wine director for the Crenn Dining Group. Now, if you know the San Francisco dining scene, you know that name. Crenn is Dominique Crenn, a chef with more Michelin stars than the Big Dipper. Not only is my guest the wine director for the group, she's also in charge of curating all beverage lists at all Crenn locations and overseeing the style of service and opening new projects, domestic and international. In fact, she's just returned from France, and I'm sure she has some stories to tell. My guest is Rachel Coe. Hello, Rachel Coe. I like the way that sounds. Hello, Rachel Coe.
Hello. Yes, my parents intended that to rhyme. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
It feels good to be here, right? On a nice warm day. We're in the air-conditioned Vintner's room.
Thank you so much for this.
All right, let's get right to it. You were just in France. Were you in Paris?
I was, yes.
What's happening there in Paris?
It's hot in the summer, just like it is here. We opened up a restaurant.
So it's open now?
It is open now as of July 1st, which is very exciting. It's called Golden Poppy. It's our first international project.
That is really cool. And I'm sure that Dominique is very excited about that.
Oh, yeah. You know, she's been in California now for 30 some odd years. And of course, France is her home. She wanted to go back and seemed like the perfect time to do so.
How long were you there?
2 months, actually. Yeah.
Long enough to develop any good routines, like pastries in the morning at a special French place. That's sort of the image I have in my mind of living in France.
Oh, certainly.
I get up in the morning and I'm going to go get a pastry.
I did do that. That was probably the only routine I had, was coffee and pastries every single morning.
And then after that, it was work.
But you know, the work culture is very different there.
Oh.
And I must say I enjoyed it initially. It was great to work 8-hour days and get out. And, you know, initially the restaurant wasn't open yet, so we weren't working service. And I found myself wandering the streets of Paris at like 5 p.m., not knowing what to do with myself. Wow. But there's, of course...
This is before the restaurant opened?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the restaurant opened and you worked restaurant hours?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Of course.
I was going to say, you're managing a restaurant in the beverage program and you're working 8-hour days. Impossible!
But I did certainly enjoy those 2 glorious weeks.
That's awesome. And now you're back. I'm glad you came to see us. You have something going on up here right now. Tell me about that.
Yes. So Atelier Crenn, our whole restaurant group, has a beautiful farm here in Sonoma, just down the road from you you all.
What's it called?
It's called Bluebell Farm.
Bluebell Farm.
Yeah, it's
That's
a lovely,
nice name.
idyllic place.
Do you put on your overalls and get out there and...
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Certainly during the pandemic, they were sending us up there to do some farm work. And I realized I'm not as rugged as I thought I was. But this is a little bit more tame, mostly just serving guests, pouring wine, and showing them the beautiful property.
Oh, it's a thing like that. You see, in my mind, what I had was, this is a farm. They grow vegetables, and they use those vegetables down in San Francisco at the restaurant.
They do that too.
But it's also open for people to come see.
Just this summer, we started doing lunches there.
Oh, okay. How many people can come?
10.
That's it?
Yes.
Do you have to have a reservation?
Reservations only, of course.
Très exclusive?
Très exclusive. Oui.
That sounds like it. 10 people on the farm for lunch. That's it.
For lunch, that's it. They get a tour. It's beautiful.
Oh, okay.
Some lovely treats are passed around, and then sit down, pour wine under this beautiful walnut tree, and it's great.
Oh, so you were doing that today?
Yeah, I was doing that today.
I thought she was getting her hands dirty. I thought she was like,
no.
Then she shows up in this pretty dress, looking all sun-kissed. Yep. And I'm like, oh, she's been working on the farm all day. It doesn't look right to me.
I was working on the farm, just a little different type of farm work.
All right, we're going to talk more about that stuff in a little bit. But first, we are going to taste the first wine on today's episode, which is a French wine. And it's actually in honor of Dominique Crenn, who came from a certain part of France known as Brittany. It's from that area, right? Muscadet?
Oui.
Oh, merci.
Just kidding. I'm back from France. We'll speak English now.
So it's a Muscadet, which is a white wine from the west coast of France. And it's funny, Muscadet, they make it from a grape. This is my favorite trivial thing about Muscadet, is they make it from a grape called Melon de Bourgogne. Now, if you look at the map, you see Muscadet over there on the west coast, and then you see Bourgogne, which is Burgundy, about 600 miles to the east. And there is no Melon de Bourgogne in Bourgogne. And the story I heard was that about 600 years ago, there was a king, one of the Burgundian kings, and apparently they all had attitudes. And
they all do.
They just did not like Melon de Bourgogne, and they basically said, no more. Plant more Chardonnay. Apparently, they were all about the cougar juice. And even back then. And that's how Burgundy became Chardonnay country and Pinot country. And, of course, the microclimate works. So somebody, and actually this wine is made by a family that's been making wine in the area, Muscadet, for a few hundred years. They started out in Burgundy. Apparently, at some point, now let me read what I've got for you, okay? This is a wine from Muscadet. It's from Chateau de la Jousseliniere. I said that all in one go. I thought I would have to say it over and over because it's a long French name.
It is a long French name.
The Chon family. That's Chon. They were in Burgundy. They were growing grapes. They were in the mid to late 17th century. And then one of the Chons, Mathurin Chon, left for La Côte Atlantique in 1719. He headed out for the Atlantic coast with an armful of Melon de Bourgogne cuttings. Nearly 3 centuries later, his descendants, Gilbert and Fille, the children, continue the family tradition with 60 hectares of vines, which is about 100 acres. And they've got this great granite schist soil, which is like the shale. It's all broken up. And the next wine we're going to taste later is similar, but it's from a different country, so they call the schist something else. Melon de Bourgogne, some planted during the 1930s, are in this wine. So some old vines. Do you like it?
I love it. I love Muscadet.
It's funny because people will tell you that Muscadet is the perfect wine to pair with oysters on the half shell. This bottle has a picture of an oyster on it. I thought, well, this is perfect.
It's perfect. They know what they're doing. I sure am thankful for that lovely gentleman who had to move from Burgundy to the Atlantic coast to plant some Melon de Bourgogne.
He just went off to the coast, because you're in Burgundy.
It's a dream.
He just wanted to. Maybe he wanted to surf.
Now, Mike, you didn't put this together yet, but you see, you brought me a beautiful Melon de Bourgogne, and I brought you a beautiful melon.
Oh, Oh,
from the farm.
that's what that is?
Yes, that is
melon?
a melon. Korean melon grown on our farm.
Melon? Oh, Korea.
Yeah. To hell with the oysters. Melon.
All right,
and
tell me
melon.
about this melon. This comes from Bluebell Farms?
It comes from Bluebell Farm. It's something we just started planting
it's a
this
tiny
season.
little melon. It's about the size of a very large avocado.
Yeah, it's adorable. It's crunchy, as you may be able to hear.
Wow.
Similar to a cucumber, just a touch of sweetness. Zippy and refreshing, just like a muscadet.
It's got a very thick skin.
You typically don't eat the skin, but you're doing a good job getting it down.
I'm just crunching away here on the podcast.
You know what? I take it back. I don't know if you don't eat the skin. I just don't eat the skin.
Well, it's
Maybe
very
that's
thick.
a preferential thing.
I bit into it and like, whoa, that's a thick skin. It's good though, but yeah, it's not super sweet. But when you said cucumber, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so it's not that. It's not sweet melon. It's good with the wine too. All right, I'm going to present you now with your official stack of Tall Mike Wine Podcast coasters. Can you get a picture of this, Dana?
A whole stack.
Perfect. Tall Mike Wine Podcast coasters available for you if you want to email me at tallmikewine@gmail.com. I will send you a stack of coasters. I send stacks of these coasters to people all over the place. What do you think of the coaster?
I love it. Good quality. I'm actually a coaster collector, if you could believe it.
I'd be honored to be in the club.
I collect far too many things, but coasters are one of them.
What do you think of the wine? Give me that sommelier thing.
Oh,
where
goodness.
You tell me what you smell and how you feel and what emotions this brings up for you from your childhood. And don't cry.
It is nostalgic. Muscadet was kind of an early quaffable wine for me when I first started getting into wine. Always had good value.
This was like $15.
Yeah, see, I love that. More wine needs to be $15.
One of the first things I think when I smell it and sip it is a little bit of like chalky minerality.
Yeah, for me, I get that like that salty sea spray. That like I am on the coast. I'm shucking an oyster, though I can't shuck an oyster to save my life.
From the Côte d'Atlantique.
Yeah. For me, it's this kind of subtle, floral, fruity thing going on that's very restrained. The lees aging, I think, is really unique in this wine, or in these wines in general, and with Muscadet from the Loire. And I like that. A lot of times you associate lees with Chardonnay, going back to our Bourgogne connections.
So in Burgundy, and of course here, when they make Chardonnay, sometimes they leave it on the lees. And the lees are just the stuff that settles to the bottom of the tank. The yeast cells mostly, and bits of the skin of the grape. And when you're making Chardonnay and you're trying to increase the richness of the wine, you will get in there with a stick and stir it up. They call that stick a bâton. And this is bâtonnage, and you're stirring the wine. And in Muscadet, they don't do that. They leave it sitting in the tank, and sometimes for a long, long time. And it just sort of increases the texture very subtly. You'll see it on a bottle of Muscadet. You'll see it'll say Surly.
It's like a lemon yogurt.
A lemon yogurt. I like that. Let's talk about something I found interesting from your bio. You grew up in Los Gatos. That's part of what we call Silicon Valley here in the Bay Area. Were your family tech people?
They were not, actually.
What kind of people were they?
Great people,
That's
first
good.
off. The best.
It's good to hear.
No, my parents were actually both in medicine.
Oh.
My dad is a surgeon and my mother is an occupational therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, we grew up in Silicon Valley. I didn't really understood what that meant for a while until Netflix was launched in my hometown. Back when you'd have those paper envelopes with the Netflix.
They were coming from Los Gatos.
They were coming from Los Gatos.
Wow, just down the street from your house.
Just down the street.
And your dad had you tasting wine at the dinner table. How old were you?
I don't have a hold on really what age I was.
Okay.
I can't recall.
Tell me how it all worked.
I think I must have been 11, 12, 13.
Okay.
And it was essentially dad, mom having wine at dinner, all of us kids surrounding them, and probably all of us kids being like, hey, what's that? Can I taste it? And they graciously let us, but in a more thoughtful way. And then it kind of snowballed into my dad then printing out Wine Spectator reviews of said wine and asking us what we tasted in
Really?
it. At the time, I didn't really know that there weren't like cherries and tobacco and smoke and vanilla in the wine.
That's a little much for a kid to
For sure.
comprehend.
But it became kind of like a fun trivia game.
That's cool.
And
I'm jealous of that.
Yeah, it was really cool.
My parents had shitty wine.
I had no idea, and it
So your
wasn't.
parents were in the medical field, so they were drinking some nice wines.
It was, my dad had a very, different style. I mean, this was like the early 2000s, probably when this really picked up. And
now I
he
feel
was,
really old.
Definitely getting into wine. Was he into wine growing up in, Texas and Virginia where he did grow up? No, not at all.
You come to California.
You're a doctor.
You're hanging out with other doctors.
And of course, what does a doctor in California drink in the early 2000s is some beautiful big Napa Cabernet.
Sure.
So that's essentially mostly what we tasted.
Okay.
Was Napa, Cabernet, Merlot, these Bordeaux varietals. I certainly learned what characteristics to call out, so then I could accurately match the report that my dad had printed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh yeah, tobacco. Does it say tobacco in that description? Of course it does. Or does it say cherries? Yes.
Oh, cherries.
Good job, Rachel.
I tell people all the time to say, how do you get all those flavors? I say, let me give you a shortcut. If you're drinking red wine and you say cherry,
yep,
you're right.
And that's what I learned. Always say cherry.
Tell me about the food scene. What was on the table dinner-wise?
Oh.
Was your mom cooking?
My mom was cooking, yes. If my dad was cooking, it was solely pretty much just bratwurst, and he'd grill steaks.
That's
Don't get
dad
me wrong,
food
but
right there.
Yeah, my mom was kind of adventurous. I mean, she had 4 kids to feed, some of them pickier than others. She'd make a great beef stroganoff.
Wow,
like
that's
Italian
comfort food right
sausage
there.
pasta. We had taco nights, of course, my dad being from Texas.
Not too fancy.
Not too fancy, but always delicious. And
but good wine.
And they definitely encouraged us to be adventurous with our eating.
Did you have a favorite wine back then?
Probably one of my favorites at the time, maybe I was probably 15 or 16, was maybe a Joseph Phelps. I can't recall if it was an Insignia. I just remember, it likely wasn't. I
like
will
a
say.
15-year-old drinking the Joseph Phelps Insignia.
But I remember just like really loving.
He rolls out the 98. He rolls out the 98, and you're like, "Do you have the 97?"
Come on, Dad. Something along those lines. I loved the ridge wines as well. I think for me, growing up in Los Gatos and being at the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains, there was like a big connection.
You were in wine
there.
country. You were in Silicon Valley, but you were in one of the wine countries.
I was in wine country.
Yeah,
the hell was Silicon Valley? Sure. There's more going on there.
Yeah, you got Santa Cruz. You got all the areas to the south there on the coast. Santa Lucia Highlands, not too far away. Something happened with you and food because you decided you wanted to be a chef.
I did.
And you went off to college. First of all, why Missouri?
Missouri. I guess long story short, in high school, I wanted to be a chef.
Were you cooking meals by this time?
Oh, yeah. I was cooking at a young age.
Okay.
I would encourage my friends to come over and I would try little hors d'oeuvres. And I mean, Ina Garten was my queen. I loved her, wanted to be her. But no, I wanted to go to culinary school. And my parents, being the practical people they were, said, you can definitely cook, but you got to go to a 4-year college. You can't go straight to trade school.
Because they were people with education.
They are. Didn't know where exactly to go, but my mother actually grew up in Missouri, in Columbia, went to University of Missouri, and a little tie-in, my grandfather was the dean of the College of Agriculture back in the 70s and 80s, and actually started a hospitality management program there. It was either Vegas, which I don't think is, cheers to the people that go to
UNLV?
College to Vegas. Yeah. Did you go there?
No.
Okay.
No, you said Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
Like
yeah. UNLV has
right?
a great hospitality school. Cornell.
Okay.
Of course, but I did not have the Cornell grades. No. I was watching Food Network when I got home. I wasn't doing my homework. But yeah, I went to University of Missouri and spent summers out there growing up. Never thought I wanted to go to college there, and then finally toured it as like a 17-year-old. Fell in love and did hospitality and had a very like kind of classic college experience. Okay. And I will say it was good to get out of.
Sure. It's always good to get away from that the bubble that you're in when you're a kid, because you're surrounded by people that all are like you. Mm-hmm. So you finished, and we were still thinking chef when you finished.
No, I think it was probably my senior year when I started thinking more about how much I loved wine, loved talking about it, and not just the wine and beverage aspect, but also like the human interaction part was getting the taste of like working front of house and getting to know people and serving guests and like feeling that sort of fulfillment in just human interaction.
There's a big wall in the restaurant business. Front of house is on one side, back of house is on the other side. And it's really, they are two vastly different worlds. You know, the people in the kitchen are cooking the food. They're working really hard. I mean, when I was a kid, I liked to cook, and my mom would say things like, "Oh, you're going to be a chef one day." And even back then, before I got into restaurants, way before, I said, I think chefs work too hard.
And I think that's what I realized in my senior year of college.
Okay.
Quite frankly, I didn't think I had the, creative capability to really make a name for myself or do something excellent. Like, yes, I can dice an onion a certain way, but like, can I create flavors and, build a menu and all of that? And I think that started to get a little intimidating. And I was like, well, man, I love wine. I love the history, the geology, the geography, everything about it. I know about it and I enjoy studying it. And then it made sense to transition that way.
Okay. And then what happened?
I graduated college and went straight in to take my sommelier exam.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm very fortunate.
So you have been studying with the Court of Master Sommeliers and you are advanced.
Yes.
Which, if you don't know, advanced means you're like on the ladder, you're up the ladder, and you're almost to Master Sommelier. Advanced is kind of where they separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't get past advanced. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you going to work on that Master Somm?
Still undecided. When I passed that exam, the advanced back in 2019, I was like, absolutely, yes, I'm going to do that. And then come 2020, things change.
Yeah.
I love wine. I love studying it. I don't know if I want to study it as intensely as I once did.
It's a commitment.
I think I'd rather enjoy learning in a more kind of casual setting. We'll see. I haven't closed the door.
Live it and do it. And because people ask me that all the time, I'm talking about wine. People say, what did you do before you were here at the winery? I said, I worked in restaurants for 20 years. And then they say, oh, are you a sommelier? And I'm like, well, the technical definition of that term is the guy who brings the wine into the restaurant. As far as like, is he certified here, there, everywhere? It's like, that's a quantifying knowledge that a lot of people pick up along the way. And they might know a lot of stuff. But if they've never gone in and signed up for the courses and taken the classes and then paid the money to take the tests, they're not technically. So I tell people, I'm like, well, I know all that stuff, but I'm not.
No, I think you can be a sommelier without ever taking a sommelier exam.
Totally.
For sure.
I tell people here, I say, I know some stuff.
You're still working in a restaurant that is busy, long hours, late nights, difficult guests. Just because you know about wine doesn't immediately make you more fancy and more intriguing.
Some people really want that lapel pin.
And I'll tell you, I've maybe worn my advanced pin a few times. I mean, I think for me, starting as a sommelier at 22 years old, it was good to have a certification and to feel like I kind of knew my stuff. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Totally. You can drop F-bombs.
Shit.
You can say the C word if you want. I don't think anybody's ever said the C word on the podcast, but if you need to.
Well, that's one of my favorite words, so hold tight. No, I think for me, it was difficult being 22 and trying to tell these 50, 60-year-old men or women at this restaurant that I knew what they should be drinking. And they're like, well, but it did help me with my confidence. Like, yes, I've studied this. Yes, I've tasted these wines. But no, you learn more with time and age and everything.
It is a thing that you have to do to learn because you can't possibly know everything, even if you study it. Because when you're studying it, it's academic knowledge.
Yeah.
It's not real world experience. All right. It's time to taste the second wine. The second wine is a Spanish wine, and it's from a part of Spain that is up in the northeast. I like these wines, and they typically need a lot of time in the bottle to age and get better and better and better. And this is from all the way back to 2006. This is a wine from Priorat in Spain. This is from Terra de Verema. It is a wine they call their Triumvirat. You're familiar with these wines. Tell me what you know about Priorat.
I think Priorat's vastly underrated. Doesn't get enough appreciation as other wines like Rioja and Ribera del Duero.
Those are the big regions. Those are like the Napa Valley.
But yeah, no, I know
Spain.
Priorat was kind of the same story as a lot of these sort of classic wine regions. Is some monks settling down in an area, growing grapes for sacramental wine. Happens that they grow grapes on these very unique soil types that really make the wine stand apart from other regions. Of course, there's perhaps a lot of love and care also put into that winemaking. I love it. Initially learning about wine, Priorat to me was compared closely to the Rhone a lot, to Chateau.
A lot of the same grapes.
Carignan,
This one
Grenache.
is a Carignan based blend that we're drinking. 90% Carignan in Spain. They call it Carignan. And then there's a little bit of Grenache. And then a tiny bit of Syrah. This is a wine that got 95 points in the Wine Advocate when it was released, but it was released over 10 years ago. It's from 2006. It was the wine of the week in the LA Times in April of 2009. So I love drinking wines like this that are ageable once you have aged them.
I don't think I'd want to drink this in 2009.
I just stuck my nose in the glass for the first time. I was like, oh my God.
Stunning. Yeah.
Yeah. I get a lot of hot asphalt.
In the best way possible.
And the best people, and you say
hot
that
asphalt that you're looking at while you're sitting in a pool.
Yeah, you say that
you're
to people.
You're not standing
and
on
like,
it.
What? The tasting notes here with the bottles say, break out a bottle for that spring leg of lamb, for ribs grilled over the fire, for a nice tri-tip or flank steak. That sounds good.
Some of my favorite things about wine are the descriptions and the food suggestions you get.
You know, people people get paid money to write those things.
And I love it. I love what they're imagining. I'm not going to cook a leg of lamb. Have you ever cooked a leg of lamb?
I've never cooked a leg of lamb.
Exactly.
I've cooked probably more ground lamb in lamb burgers than anything else. Best burger you ever ate?
A leg of lamb, or
leg of lamb. That's an all-day project. That's an all-day project. That's for other people. Priorat is in the province of Tarragona in southwest Catalonia, which is in the northeastern part of Spain. The area is characterized by its unique terroir of black slate and quartz. Remember, in France, we called it schist. In Spain, they called it licorella. Isn't that great? It's the same soil. I like the Spanish word for it.
Oh, yeah. Everything's, French is sexy, but Spanish is,
licorella. Like, what are you doing down there?
Black slate.
Licorella. Now, here's the history. The first recorded evidence of grape growing and wine production dates from the 12th century. The monks from the Carthusian monastery in Scala Dei, that's DEI from the Latin, founded in 1194, introduced the art of viticulture. The prior of Scala Dei, so the head monk is the prior. He ruled as feudal lord over 7 villages in the area, which gave rise to the name Priorat. The monks tended to the vineyards for centuries until 1835, and this is the sad part of the story, when they were expropriated by the state and distributed to smallholders. So I'm guessing it was the vineyards that were expropriated and not the monks themselves. We're going to make all the monks go away now, and we're going to give the vineyards to the people.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the history of Priorat. And the wine is delicious. Tell me more about what you think of this wine. Give me some notes.
I work in a pescatarian restaurant.
It's true.
And I
Dominique
work a lot with white wine, champagne,
Dominique
lighter
banned
red.
meats a few years ago, right?
Well, get this. We are now working with lab-grown chicken meat.
Oh.
Which is pretty cool.
Chicken from the lab? Okay.
Chicken from the lab. No farms, just chicken. But no
chicken. Let me go down to the lab.
But it's interesting because I think what's so exciting about wine is that you have these just love affairs with all these different styles of wine, kind of depending on the place and the time and whatnot. And for me, working mostly with white wine or, adventuring into lighter bodied reds, interesting reds, like I kind of forgot about Priorat. And someone brought it up to me today, and then you brought it out, and I'm like, God damn, I love Priorat. I forgot. It's just like this earthy, meaty, smoky, herbaceous wine that still has this like beautiful texture without being super opulent.
No, it's not huge.
No.
People always talk, I want the huge wine. People who want the Napa Cabs, the huge wine. Like, this has a lot going on. It's super complex, but it's not super heavy.
In the best way possible. It tastes like I'm drinking wine off asphalt.
Yeah.
Just rocky, crushed,
Exactly. I had a conversation about Priorat with Laura Schurmeister. She and her husband owned a little tiny winery up in Glen Ellen, and I went up there and hosted a podcast with them. The first time I ever had two people on at one time. Because their story is all about love. They fell in love and opened a winery together.
One day.
And she talked about her early experience with wine when she knew she loved wine is when she went to this little neighborhood wine shop in her neighborhood in North Carolina, and liked this wine so much that she bought a case of it. And she was like, oh my God, I'm spending a lot of money on this wine, but I love it so much. And it was Priorat. And I said, so tell me what you love about it. She says, I like the fact that when you taste it, and in this case, it's not so much, but she says it's like having river rocks in your mouth. It's that really minerality, stoniness.
Priorat uses the same grapes as Chateau, but it's a totally different expression of these grapes. Entirely different. I think you feel maybe more ripeness in Chateau I don't know. I mean, this is also beautifully aged, 2006.
2006,
and it's wholly appreciate that.
A big home run. The kitchen is right next door to us here in the Vintner's room, but sadly, there's no leg of lamb being prepared. Let's talk about wine lists in restaurants. In your opinion, what are the basics? Do you think about the clientele that may frequent the restaurant? Are you thinking price points? Is it mostly about the menu, the chef? Where do you start?
I start with the food.
Okay.
You got to start with the food.
Of course.
I think food is first, clientele second, and then there's the basics you have to cover.
What are the basics for you?
The basics for me, I think we've called them BBC in the past.
Okay. What is it? BBC?
Burgundy, Bordeaux, Champagne.
Okay.
Classics.
Because you work for a French.
It's a French restaurant, but the concept has certainly shifted Californian, and it is pescatarian. So you kind of have to remove one of those Bs, or the Bordeaux's that you're finding maybe have more age, like this Priorat, that are more approachable.
Okay.
I'm not going to pop open a fresh 2019, or I would not like to, but at the same time, everyone should drink what they like, and if they want to have
Bordeaux,
that,
you don't have to focus on the Cabernet based. You can focus a little more on the Merlot based.
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility there, but I think really cuisine is the star, especially in the restaurant that I work in. It's trying to find exciting ways to accentuate that cuisine using beverages, whether it's wine or sake or beer or cider, but also respect the food. It's so hard sometimes to find a pairing when the food is already so damn good.
Are there certain wines from certain producers you have to have sort of signature wines on a Rachel Co. list? Like if somebody were dropping into a restaurant and be like, looking at the list like, oh, where's Rachel? She made this list. I know it.
Damn well better have a good champagne list.
Okay.
Champagne, number one.
Okay.
I also like some kind of fun, funky stuff. Not too funky, but I think showcasing California in a way that's different than maybe people expect, especially with us being pescatarian. Yeah, I love Napa Cab, but I can't pour that for every guest. So
yeah, I mean, like California, I mean, it's synonymous. Napa Cab is the most esteemed wine in all of California, and Napa Cab goes best with meat. So what do you do?
So finding other cool projects like what John Lockwood is doing with Enfield wines and Old Vine Tempranillo out of Lodi. That's just like super delicate and, you know, really showcasing that Tempranillo can be so different than going back to Spain, not over oaked and really food friendly.
Sure.
I always like to do a little nod to female producers too. I like to be thoughtful in the wines that I pick for the list, not just in like, oh yeah, this wine tastes good and pairs well. It's like, well, who's making the wine? Where is it made from? Are these people doing things right? Are they farming correctly? Are they trying to be sustainable, or whether it's organic, biodynamic, dry farming, whatever? Because the wine has a story. Of course, like small family farms are encouraged too. And I think that adds to the whole experience, is being able to express the story of the wine. So
When I was running wine programs in restaurants, I would always tell my staff, I said, you can go to the table and talk about the flavors of the wine, but if you can tell a story about the winery, I used to like talking about going to Paradigm in the Napa Valley, beautiful wines and
I
small
love
production.
Paradigm.
But I would tell stories about visiting there and just having so much fun playing fetch with the dogs. And you tell that story to people and they want the wine. They want the wine immediately.
It's the story. It truly is. You could be telling me like, oh yeah, you're tasting cherry and smoke and whatever. But I don't really want to hear what you're tasting.
Right.
I want to be able to explore that for myself. And I try to do that with my guests too. Like, I think it's more important to call out maybe not the necessarily the tasty notes, but the structural notes, why we choose to pair it with food. But yeah, the story.
Are you often asked to do pairings? Is that part of your job? Do you have any simple rules to live by with pairing wine with food? Because I tell people when they ask me about it, I say, the palate that you use to taste the wine, the one that craves the wine, or on the other end of the palate that is craving the specific food. If you just think about it yourself, you're just going to pair your own wine. Like, I'm in the mood for a Napa Cab and I think I want a steak. Like, you just paired your own wine with food because it's your palate talking to you. So if the whole food and wine pairing thing, I'm kind of,
I know, I have similar feelings. I think that there's so many great wine pairings out there. I think that food and wine pairings are so personal, just like palates are so personal. Preferences, like what shirt you choose to put on in the morning is different than the shirt that I would choose.
Do you like this shirt?
No, I do like that shirt.
It has fish on it.
I wish I chose it.
If you look careful at it.
I love fish.
There's fish on it.
Look, I got fish. Oh, you got and I don't believe in perfect pairings. That's not real because everyone's different.
Right.
I believe in playful pairings.
Okay, I like that idea.
I think that, of course, I do believe in what grows together goes together. Like, oysters and Muscadet. Hell yeah.
Right. Or
drink those all day long.
Stinky Burgundian cheese with a stinky Burgundian Pinot.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's sad, though, going back to grows together, goes together. There's not a lot of that in the new world.
No, because I think it's going to take another 100 years for that to happen, right? Because we're still babies.
We're such babies.
In California.
But yeah, no, I think for me with pairings, yes, I want to elevate the food. The food is the star, and I want to bring in a wine that can stand up to the food, but also makes people think a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because, I can pour, we can pour your average, like, Sancerre or whatever the guest wants. And it's probably going to pair with the fish dish. It's going to taste fine. Right. But I want something to be a little bit more inquisitive for that experience. A la the story or the region or the different winemaking techniques or something about the provenance that makes it unique.
It's not as easy as A plus B equals C. No. It's more, there's much more finesse involved. Yeah. I always tell people, I say, you should order what you like to eat and order what you think you want to drink. And you're probably going to create, if not the magical pairing where the angels begin to sing from on high, you're going to like it. You're going to be happy.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very rare that you are going to create some sort of train wreck of a pairing. And if you really start to worry about it too much, you're going to start to compromise one or the other. You're not going to have what you want to eat, or you're not going to have what you want to drink.
It's a little bit of a head game. And if you order a pairing, I think you're putting your trust in the sommelier to pair the wine correctly with the food. But you also have to be vulnerable yourself to trust that you might be going out of your comfort zone and trying some different things and being open to it.
Right.
For me, when I look at a pairing holistically, is like I see that, yes, we have like a 16-course tasting menu. I need to think about, of course, the wines that I'm pairing, but also the quantity of wine, the value of the wine, and also you want variation too. You want something, a variety. You want something exciting. Mm-hmm. You kind of want to see a little bit of a roller coaster, if you will, like starting with something that's, perhaps bubbles, that's classic, or maybe it's rosé, or maybe it's like a beautiful dry sherry that will get you started for this experience. But you also have some expectations, I think, as a guest, in that, like, I'm ordering a pairing. Okay, I'm at a pescatarian restaurant, but do you want to have 9 white wines? Maybe not. Even though I could probably pair you 9 white wines, and I could talk about them forever.
That's very old school, though.
But I do have to think
white wine with fish is very, very old school.
what the consumer wants, how I can show them that we can kind of meet in the middle. Yes, you like red wine. You want bold Napa Cab. All right, well, we have an oyster coming down next course. So we're going to save the cab for maybe 3 courses later. And I'm not going to say, here, I'm going to force this, white wine on you. Like, we'll have a Pinot. We'll start a little bit lighter, kind of ease ourselves into it. Pairing wines is sometimes difficult. For me, it's important to have the chef's opinion too. And our chef de cuisine is incredible. And he makes beautiful food. Dominique is incredibly trusting, which I'm very fortunate to have that kind of chef around.
That's
but
awesome.
It's important that other people taste my pairing because I want to hear a couple opinions. Do I want to hear every opinion? No.
No, because then it's a mishmash and it just leads to confusion.
And drunkenness.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Does your culinary training inform your wine selections and what you put on the list and how you taste wine? Because you went to school to be a chef.
But
So do you think maybe you're a better somm than some other somms that didn't go to culinary school?
I mean, I think I've gotten other skills from being in hospitality, like studying hospitality,
Right.
that have been very beneficial. But I don't think going to culinary school, because it wasn't a formal culinary school, makes it better. I think it's just the exposure to different flavors and different foods and understanding what a Korean melon tastes like versus a honeydew. No, I'm just kidding.
They're really different. This ain't no honeydew.
Yeah, no honeydew. No, I think having education about food and even just like watching food TV and understanding different flavors and kind of seeing just what's happening out there in the food and beverage world, I think there is a little bit of a better understanding than maybe someone who goes into it blind. But I think that anyone who's getting into wine, they're
already into food.
They're into food. For sure.
We are people who appreciate all of the things. We're all into sensory gratification. We're all hedonists, whether we admit it to ourselves or not.
But that's what life should be about, is having good food and wine.
It's
the
true,
simple
because
thing.
life
the
is
simple
short.
pleasures should be enjoyed.
Yeah. Rachel, have you guested on other podcasts?
I have not.
This is your first time as a guest on a podcast?
Yeah, first time on a podcast. I've always wanted to do it.
Are you
I like
liking
it.
it?
I'm loving it.
Do you have
Helps that there's
podcasts
wine.
you like?
I do, actually, yeah. I do listen to Armchair Expert by
Okay.
Dax Shepard. I like that one a lot.
What about wine podcasts?
I used to get so into wine podcasts when I was studying, like the Guild Somm podcast or I'll Drink to That.
Right. Those are some big names in the podcast world.
I think now I'm at the stage in my career where I want to remove, and I mean this in no offense to you, I still love listening about wine.
I'm the wine podcast that's not all about wine.
Exactly. I want more of a conversation rather than hearing about like how many oak forests you source from and what this is. And
that was my frustration.
Yeah.
When podcasts became a thing, I was like, cool, I'll find some wine podcasts to just get into. And I was so frustrated because they were just all so stiff. I want to hear people talking. I want stories about what you do and why you do it and what drives you and how it all happened for you. And we've just done this with you.
Yeah. And I think that's what drew me to do this, is that this is not, you're not grilling me on every little piece of knowledge and tidbit I've picked up. I think it's more approachable and I just want to have conversations. And I think I was listening to wine podcasts maybe a little too much when I was studying. Like every time I'd get into a car or go to the gym, it was like, you are studying for your exam and you must listen to a wine podcast and learn about this wine region and maybe listen to it again. So you can let it stick more.
But that's with purpose. It
was with purpose, but it wasn't enjoyable. Just listening to people organically talk about wine is the best. And I think that's why I enjoy eating and drinking and dining and going out and like listening to people
everything
in their
we do,
own place.
The wine business, the restaurant business, this podcast, I feel like this is the simple way to put it. We are candy. We are not vitamins.
Yeah.
Right? We're candy.
Yeah, we're candy.
We're not vitamins. We're not trying to fix people. We're trying to help people have a lot of fun. And like order the extra dessert, and thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
this has been
it went by
delightful.
fast, didn't it?
It really did.
Yeah. I'm going to read the credits now.
I can't wait.
You ready?
Your voice is like butter.
Oh,
It's so smooth.
the best butter. What's the word for butter in French?
Beurre.
Oh, that's right. Like beurre blanc.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, God.
Isn't it funny we know the word for butter in every language?
My favorite word in Spanish might be mantequilla.
Mantequilla.
And my favorite word in French is probably confit.
Confit. Oh. Yeah.
Right? Those are just comfortable words about the best, most decadent food. The Tall Mike Wine Podcast was conceived and is written, produced, and edited and maintained by yours truly. If you have questions about how it all works, suggestions for a show topic or guests, or you just want to say hi, and maybe receive your very own set of official Tall Mike Wine Podcast coasters, send me an email to tallmikewine@gmail.com. To see behind the scenes of the podcast, as well as what I'm up to when I'm not podcasting, basically drinking wine and eating good food, follow me on Instagram at Tall Mike Wine. I thank you for finding me. I'd appreciate some love in the form of ratings and reviews, and make sure you're following me on whichever app you're using. That's it for this time. Thanks, Rachel, for hanging out. I'm Mike Stone. Keep swirling, keep sniffing, keep sipping. Cheers.